Is Google's delay in releasing source code a sign of AOSP's impending doom?
And could Google finally make Health Connect a true alternative to Apple Health?
I'm Mishaal Rahman.
And I'm C. Scott Brown, and this is the Authority Insights podcast where we break down the latest news and leaks surrounding the Android operating system.
So this week, or actually last week, Google released Android 16 QPR1. For those of you Pixel users, this came in the form of the September 2025 Pixel drop. And typically developers, once Google pushes out the update for Pixel phones, they only have to wait about 24 to 48 hours maximum for Google to upload the source code. But this time, the source code is nowhere to be found, and Google told us that developers might have to wait a couple of weeks for the source code to arrive. And to date, Health Connect has been a central hub for all your health and fitness data, but it currently doesn't track any data of its own. But that could change in an upcoming update. And as also this week, we got a threefer in terms of the updates that are coming to the Gemini app. We have a bunch of new features that are improving the experience of using the app and starting a chat, searching through your previous chats, and then finding key info about real-world places in your chats. So let's get started with the biggest story, in my opinion. It's the fact that Google has delayed the release of the source code for Android 16 QPR1. Now, for regular users, you probably won't really care about this news because, you're not going to be diving through Android source code anytime soon. It doesn't really matter to you. But it is a concerning trend considering, for years now, Google has released a source code in a very timely manner following the release of an update for a Pixel device. So just for a little bit of background knowledge, what is AOSP? AOSP is short for the Android Open Source Project. It is the open source version of the Android operating system that runs on all Android devices. It is licensed under the Apache License 2.0, which is a software license that is very permissive. It allows anyone, even you and me, to take the code, modify it, and redistribute it however we please without paying a fee to Google and without having to upload any changes we made. We don't have to release a source code for anything we do. And that's why you have like One UI from Samsung, HyperOS from Xiaomi. They have all these heavily customized versions of Android that are originally based on Google's open source version. And the only reason why these various flavors of Android even kind of behave similarly to other devices is because Google tries to maintain some semblance of control through compatibility, licensing requirements, through application distribution agreements, through its Google Mobile Services bundling. And Scott, I kind of want to ask you, for many years now, Google has had this kind of dual layer approach where they have, AOSP is open source, and then you have Google tacking on all these requirements to OEMs through Google Mobile Services, through the compatibility requirements. What did you think of this arrangement? Do you think it's been effective for Google in like making Android more popular, or do you think it's kind of been a bad approach for Google to grow Android?
Well, I guess it depends on how you look at it. Like as far as spreading Android around and making it become the dominant mobile operating system in the world, huge success. 100%, no question. Android is in everything. It's in cars, it's in tablets from Amazon, that has, quote unquote, its own operating system, Fire OS, but that's just Android with, heavily modified code. And then, I think like the screens that you find on a plane when you're riding on a plane and you see the screen, 99% of those are Android. Like Android is everywhere. So if all we're thinking about is whether or not this system made Android popular, 100% yes, very big win. The question, though, is whether or not it's been successful at doing what Google needs it to do, which is to be an operating system that it controls and makes money off of. And that is a little bit more of a shaky answer. There's not a definitive yes there, which is the main reason why I think this new development with AOSP, the source code not being released in a timely manner, as well as a couple of other things that have happened over the past few months, and even a couple that we've already talked about, even in the short history of this podcast, that lead to the concept that Google is trying to close down Android a little bit.
Hmm.
It's an open source operating system. It's never going to be closed source. Like Google would have to fundamentally change the entire core idea of what Android is. So it's always going to be open source. It's just that Google is sort of slimming down how much of it is actually accessible to the public in a very open manner. And the reason for that is because Google wants to have more control over it, and it's seeing pressure from outside sources to do different things with Android, most notably the EU. So depending on how you look at it, the AOSP system has been good or not so great. And it really just kind of goes with how you perceive the success of Android being.
Yeah, I've always felt, there's a bit of an asterisk when you call AOSP or Android an open source operating system, like open source project. Because, when you think of open source, you think of like you have a public GitHub repository where a bunch of independent developers all contribute code and you all work together. And you have like maintainers who like approve patches and approve code, kind of like in the Linux kernel, which is like there's a huge community of people volunteering and working on things like and contributing to a single project. It's quite a bit different when it comes to Android. Google is the sole maintainer of Android. They have final say in terms of what gets contributed and submitted to the code base. Not only that, earlier this year, they actually shut down the ability for developers to contribute their own code. They now develop Android fully in private. And so, if you're not a Google engineer or you're not a engineer who works at one of the OEMs, there's a very low chance you'll be able to contribute anything that ends up in Android's code base. And another thing is that Google has the final say on whether or not they release the Android source code at all. There is technically no legal obligation for them to do so. There's nothing forcing them to release the source code for the Android for AOSP that runs on your phones. And in fact, there are several versions of Android where they don't release the source code at all. We don't have the source code for Wear OS. There's no source code for Android TV. We do have the source code for Android Automotive, but that's actually a strategic move from Google because they are trying to convince car makers to actually adopt their platform. And to do that, they kind of want to give car makers the ability to customize it to suit their needs. So they're kind of forced into that position. Okay, we want to attract car makers and we want them to build on the Android platform, but they won't do it unless they have some level of control. So we're going to release this as an open source platform so we can get better penetration in the car market, which is kind of like the reason why they did Android as an open source project from the get-go. Because when you're growing a project, they needed to convince smartphone makers and tablet makers and way back then that, okay, you're going to use our operating system as your base instead of another platform, or develop your own. And to do that, we're going to release it as an open source project so that, if you ever grow tired of things that we're doing, you can always fork it and start your own project. But kind of we're in this position now where Android is so ubiquitous and it's so well developed that there's really no benefit to companies shying away from it unless you're trying to like create some new form factor that Google themselves don't support, kind of like you have Meta with Horizon OS for their XR devices, which Google is now actually trying to compete with their Android XR. And you also have this position where Google is so dominant with its GMS, Google Play Services, and Google Play Store that it would be really bad idea for an OEM to release a mobile device without the Play Store. So they're kind of like in a position where they're gonna go with Google's version of Android, whether they like it or not, because if they want to have access to all the apps in the Play Store, they got to go with Google's version of it.
Yeah, I think the core idea here is that times have changed. When Android first came out, Google was trying to, like you said, trying to build these relationships, trying to make it so like, no, don't use your own proprietary operating system. We tried that, with Palm and BlackBerry and all these different Windows, all these different operating systems on all these different smartphones. And Google was kind of like, okay, we're all collectively fighting against iOS, or at the time, iPhone OS. We're all collectively fighting against that. So let's band together. Here's an operating system. It's free to use. Do whatever we want with it. Google just gifted it to them. Things are different now. Like you said, now it's like if you don't use Android, and you're not, Apple, then you're basically signing your own death certificate. You're never going to survive in the wide world of smartphones, unless you're Huawei in China specifically. But that's a very distinct difference,
Yeah.
because Huawei is basically like China, the national brand of China. So of course they can succeed there. But for everybody else, if you don't use Android, you're done. So yeah, Google's now at the position where it has all the power, and it's like, well, what benefit what benefit is there to us if we do all this stuff that we've been doing for the past, whatever it's been, 20 years? It's just not there anymore. So it's like, yeah, the times have changed, and I think Google is starting to realize that you know it can change the way it does things, and people don't really have anything that they can say about it. I mean, what's going to happen? Is Samsung going to start releasing Samsung OS on their phones? No, of course not. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
that's just not happening.
I mean, it's not just that there's no benefit now. It's actually arguably actively detrimental to them to continue going the way they've been going, because we've seen with the EU coming after Google and the Epic v Google trial that the way Google's been doing its business, where they kind of dangle AOSP as an open source platform, but then they kind of enforce their own requirements through trying to force GMS on OEMs and through the licensing agreements, that companies, governments really don't like this arrangement. They really don't like how Google is promoting AOSP as an open platform, while at the same time trying to get companies to bundle all of its services and abide by all of its rules. They kind of see this as like a bait and switch and a way for Google to exert monopolistic pressure. Ironically enough, Apple iOS has been closed from the very beginning, but they didn't get the same scrutiny in the Epic v Apple trial, and a large reason was because since they were closed from the very beginning, there was never an argument that they were having to use any monopolistic practices to kind of close off access to its platform, because the platform was never open in the first place. So if Google were to close off Android, hypothetically, then OEMs would have to work with Google. There would be no, oh, we have the option of using AOSP, but Google's forcing us to use GMS. If they were to close off Android, it would only be, if you want the latest version of Android and all the security fixes, then you have to have GMS. And that forced bundling would kind of ironically take away from the arguments that the governments have had against Google, and what I feel kind of contributed to their losses in these antitrust cases.
Yeah, so I mean, Google's kind of in a tough situation now. It's got to slowly migrate Android to being less open source, while still, of course, maintaining it as a de facto open source system. Because, like I said earlier, unless Google completely changes what Android is, it will always have to be on a certain level an open source platform, because of Apache 2.0 and all the things that entails. So it's like, I don't know. Google's in a tough position, but I think that the core issue here for this particular bit of news with the operating system, or sorry, with Google not releasing the source code for these big changes that have happened, I think it's just going to be growing pains, and developers are just going to have to sort of adjust every month as Google decides, like, oh, here's a new thing that we're going to take away that we've done before in the past. And that's going to be rough on developers, but I think in the end, it's going to continue to make Android be the dominant player. Like, that's all Google wants. Like, Google does not want Android to get worse, and it doesn't want it to lose market share. It wants it to be the number one operating system for mobile devices in the world, which it is right now, and it wants it to stay that way. So this is all very strategic. It's just that, change is hard for developers, change is hard for Android users, and we're just going to be going through a lot of changes over the next few years, and we're just going to have to see how it goes at the end. But yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of people would view this as being bad. They'd be like, "Oh, this is bad. Like, Google is doing bad things to Android." But it's not really bad. It's just things have changed. It's been a long time since Android first came around, and things can't stay the same forever.
Yeah. And I mean, we're kind of seeing like the decisions Google has to make with Android XR. I'm especially curious to see what they're going to do with that platform, because when I asked them if they plan to release the source code for it, they would not give me a yes or no answer. But I probably think I think that they're probably not going to release the source code for Android XR, because they don't want to help Meta, their biggest competitor in this space, because they already have their own AOSP fork of Android, Horizon OS, which is based on AOSP. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do moving forward with Android and the source code. I think personally that the delayed release of source code is probably going to be what they're going to be doing going forward. I did ask Google if this delay that we're seeing with Android 16 QPR1 source code is going to be a one-time thing or the new norm going forward, but I didn't hear back yet. But I think a delay makes sense because, I mean, I think it makes sense, unfortunately, because for Google, they can kind of still eat their cake and have it too. They can still kind of have Android be open source, but if you're a company who wants to access to all the latest security patches, which is a very important thing, and you also want the latest features that Google's developing in its quarterly releases, then you're gonna have to sign up and become a GMS partner. You're gonna have to sign those contracts and those agreements. So I think this is probably what's going to happen going forward. Like, Google is right. They're not killing AOSP, as Xiang Chao had mentioned on X. AOSP is not going away, but I think it is going to be very different going forward. And moving on to our next story. So something else that might be very different in the future is Google Health Connect. So Health Connect, for those of you who don't know, is a platform. It's basically it's an app and it's a framework that allows you to store health data on your device. So prior to Health Connect, you would have apps like Fitbit, Adidas Running, you would have Strava, you would have Google Fit, you would have all these different services, and they would all store their own different kinds of data in different ways. So like one app, it would read and write heart rate data in a different way than another app would. And so if you're a developer who wanted to support integrations with other applications, you would have to write 50 different integrations that handled the different ways every single app actually interpreted that data, which was kind of untenable. That's why you didn't really have a lot of apps communicating with each other. But Health Connect aims to solve that by kind of standardizing the way that apps store and retrieve certain kinds of health data. And it basically comes in the form of an app and an API that apps can use. So the app allows you to control what applications have access to what kinds of data and how long they have access to it. And then the API allows apps to read and write that data to this on-device database. And this database is secure. It is only on your device, but you can back it up to your Google Drive or other cloud storage bucket. And that's it. It basically just stores your existing health data from your other applications. It doesn't do anything else. It's not like Apple Health, which can actually use the sensors on your iPhone or your Apple Watch to actually collect some health and fitness metrics. So, Scott, before we dive into what's changing with Health Connect or what might be changing, I kind of wanted to ask you, do you use Health Connect?
No. I mean, I have it. I mean, I'm pretty sure every Android phone has it on there, but I don't really use it. I'm lucky in the sense that I have a Pixel Watch that I wear all day, every day. And before I was using the Pixel Watch, I was using Fitbit products. So it was very easy for me to just transfer everything that I've been doing with Fitbit to the Pixel Watch because Google owns Fitbit. So I'm kind of the anomaly in the sense that all of my data, my health data has always been in one place. So therefore I never had to worry about pulling in things from different apps. That being said, I do own other things that I could be using. I have a Wahoo Ticker chest strap. I have a Garmin smartwatch for hiking. I have other stuff, but I don't really use it for health tracking. So therefore, Health Connect has never really been something that I've needed. But at the same time, Health Connect made a lot of sense to me when it first came out. I was like, oh yeah, totally. Like, you've got all these different pools of data and all these different formats and whatever. Putting it all together into one place makes perfect sense to me, so that everything could be a little bit closer to what Apple's version does. But yeah, I mean, I think Health Connect was kind of a disappointment because it was a solution to a mess that Google had let happen. rather than a from the beginning, this is how it's going to be, take it or leave it thing, which I know Android fans tend to get upset about when it comes to Apple. They tend to feel like Apple is too strict and too controlling, and that's why they like Android better. But really, this is one of those situations where Apple's strict controlling ways actually make it a better platform in certain respects. Because Apple came in and said, guess what? You want to do stuff on the iPhone or the Apple Watch? You have to do it this way. That way, everything is the same and we can control everything that we want to do. And Google didn't do that. And now Google's trying to, clean up. Like, imagine your house being a complete and utter disaster after a party, and Google's coming in to be like, how are we going to fix this? Whereas Apple just didn't let that party get out of hand in the first place and doesn't have to clean anything up. So, like, that's kind of where Health Connect is in this sense. So yeah, I don't use it, and I'm lucky that I don't have to use it. But I am not. I am the anomaly. There are people at Android Authority who are not in my. Rita, for example, she's using like 20 different health things from various stuff, and trying to collect it all into Health Connect has proven to be something that's really upsetting for her because it's such a mess.
Yeah, from the beginning, it's just that kind of. I think it's the same situation that Google had with the Find My Device network, where they value privacy over convenience. With the Find My Device network, you had the issue where Google opted everyone into the more privacy-friendly option, where it'll only track people, it'll only track devices if there are at least multiple Android devices nearby pinging that tracker. With Health Connect, they made it so by default, like when it launched, that database only lived on your device. There was not even a way to transfer it to another device or back it up into the cloud. And there's still no way to sync it between devices. So as you mentioned, like Rita has had a rough time using Health Connect because she has like 20 different services and like 10 different devices, as we all do. We have so many different devices. But for her, she discovered that when you sign up and use Health Connect on your phone and you have it on your tablet, and then you have a service that's supposed to route data through Health Connect on like a treadmill, for example, any data that's collected on your phone is not synced over to your tablet. So you might have different like step counts, for example, on your phone versus your tablet, different heart rate data on your phone versus your tablet. And there's not like kind of like centralized and collected together into one central database, which was kind of like you would think is the idea behind Health Connect, but really it's like a single device database. It's not like a multi-device kind of broad database that Apple Health currently offers. But that doesn't mean things can't change. We've already saw like Google did solve the problem with the fact that Health Connect was limited to one device by adding backup and restore capabilities. And it looks like they might be working to evolve Health Connect into something beyond just a hub for your existing health data. Based on my own findings, it looks like Google is adding native step tracking support to Health Connect. And I think that would be a big deal because that would be the first kind of metric that Health Connect itself would be collecting rather than relying on third-party apps contributing that data. So Health Connect, which is built into every Android phone since Android 14, would start tracking your steps without even having you install a third-party application. And, step tracking is a very simple thing. It's just analyzing data from your phone's accelerometer. Like pretty much any phone can do it, right? So this is not like a big feature in and of itself, but the fact that they're doing this at all suggests they might be working to evolve Health Connect into something much more. Perhaps something that is finally an equivalent, a true equivalent to Apple Health. And that is something I'm excited for.
Yeah, and it should be it should be noted that Samsung Health is also much closer to Apple Health. So it's not like Android doesn't have platforms that can do a lot better than what Health Connect can do. It's just that, once again, Google is starting from complete and utter chaos and having to figure out a way to organize it without pissing everybody off. And when I say everybody, I mean, all the other companies, Garmin and Wahoo and all these fitness companies that want to have this stuff. So Google's got to figure out a way to thread the needle. How can we make it so that Health Connect is actually useful to our users and more like Apple Health and Samsung Health, but also not so rigid that our partners get really mad at us? So it's like, once again, this is a situation that Google kind of made for itself and is now trying to figure out a way out of it.
It's funny that you mentioned Samsung Health as the Android version of Apple Health when Google has its own Fitbit, which, is basically also an Android version of Apple Health. It does a lot of advanced things. It's a primary means of tracking all your health and fitness, tracking your health and fitness metrics if you have a Pixel phone or a Pixel Watch or a Fitbit. But unlike Apple Health, it's not built in to every Android device. Same is true for Samsung Health. Only Health Connect is available across the board on all Android devices. So if Google were to, let's say, upgrade the baseline for what Health Connect is capable of, and then you could install additional services like Fitbit or Samsung Health if you wanted more advanced tracking features, then I think we would be getting closer and closer to what kind of Apple Health currently offers on the iOS side of things, where you have Apple Health, but it's not the end all be all. It's not the only thing you can install and use, or you should be using on Apple devices. It's like it's a good baseline. It collects all this data together in one place, and it tracks some things, but it doesn't track everything. It doesn't work with all devices that you might want to use to improve your health. So, this is just the start of something. I hope it's the start of something big, but we'll have to wait and see. And the final bit of news that we're going to be talking about is a trio of updates coming to the Gemini app. So the first change is a refreshed new section in the Gemini app called Created by You. And this section will store all of your Gemini generated images, videos, and even deep research documents and code. This will be similar to the ChatGPT library feature, which allows you to quickly access all the things that you created within the application. A couple of months ago, they actually recently added search support within the app, which made it much easier to find, a specific chat that you had initiated with Gemini, because you could have hundreds of chats, and then having to scroll through that list would be a huge burden. And same thing is true right now. It's kind of a pain in the butt to find a specific image that you had generated through Gemini, because it would be in one of these chats here. But you have to find the exact chat that you actually made to generate that image or code base or whatever you did. So this new Created by You library will just kind of put all of that in this big, nice, beautiful gallery that you can scroll through. The next new feature is a new update to the Gemini Live experience, where if you're sharing your camera with Gemini Live and you point it at something and you ask it about, say, like a particular location, it'll start showing these Google Maps info cards that tell you information about the place name, the type of place it is, the average rating, and the number of reviews. So it's kind of like this little bit of useful information without having to kick you out of the Gemini Live camera sharing experience, which is what I found to be one of the more annoying things about the Gemini Live so far, is that if you ask it about something, it'll tell you, like, it'll tell you the information, but it doesn't show you the information, so you can't like actually visually see what it's telling you. And sometimes that information is pretty useful. So having that information right as you're actually pointing your camera at something will be really helpful. And then finally, Google is improving the home screen for Gemini to change it from where you have these chips at the bottom, where you have the plus icon, the banana image for the nano banana image generator, the research button, and the three-dot menu for more. They're testing a new UI where you have this new menu option that expands into these this card that shows you all the available options. At the same time, you can also access these same options by these chips that are underneath the hello text. And they're also testing some suggestions where instead of showing those chips that I previously just showed, you could alternatively just quickly start a new chat with Gemini by clicking one of these suggested prompts that are shown underneath the hello message. So this is a couple of things that Google has added. I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on all three of them, but in particular, Scott, I wanted to ask you about the new Google Maps Live, the new Google Live Maps info card feature, because I feel like this feature and all the other Gemini Live screen sharing, camera sharing features are kind of preparing for the upcoming launch of the Android XR glasses. What do you think?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, I can imagine the usefulness of that. I can imagine the usefulness of it just from a phone perspective. I travel a lot, and one of the things that I use Gemini Live for pretty frequently when I'm traveling is I take it out and I point it at something, a landmark or a building or a street sign or whatever, and ask what's the significance of what I'm looking at here. And, like you said, Gemini will respond and say, oh, that's, the White House, and its significance is it's the house of the president, or whatever. Like it'll explain what it is, but it doesn't have any maps information, nothing I can touch or click or see. It just talks to you. So yeah, so having the maps information would be super useful. But yeah, I mean, with Android XR sort of eventually coming, I know it's here, but we still need a device to use it on. And
Yeah.
Google told us that it was coming this year, but I still haven't heard anything about that. So we're getting it's pretty deep in the year now, so I don't know what's
Yeah.
going on there, but yeah, theoretically, Android XR, a piece of hardware with Android XR on it, is coming this year, and yeah, this seems like a logical preparation for using your headset or your glasses or whatever it is that is coming to visualize things around you and get information directly from Gemini for assisting you to get, to dive even further into information surrounding whatever it is that you're checking out. So yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. When is it coming though?
Yeah, I can't imagine myself like awkwardly holding my phone up and asking it about like a place in public. Like, oh, tell me about this place, and waiting for it to respond, and then having it show the results. Like, I would just quietly pull out my phone, type in the prompt, like, tell me about this place, and like take a picture. Like, for me, it seems all of these Gemini Live camera sharing experiences are just kind of testing testing these features out for Android XR. Like, they're definitely not intended for you to use these on phones. They're just too awkward to be holding your phone up in this way.
Yeah, but the big problem is that so far the only thing that we know is absolutely coming out at some point in the near future is Project Muhan, which is the thing that Google and Samsung and Qualcomm have been developing in joint together, which is very definitively a headset. It is something that you do not take with you to go other places. You're not walking around with Project Muhan on your face. So yeah, so this would have to be for something that you take with you on a walk, which the only logical explanation would be a pair of smart glasses. And we know that Google is working on these, but they are, as far as I can tell anyway, much further behind in the development process towards an actual retail launch release than Project Muhan. So yeah, so if this is just definitively for Android XR, who knows when we're actually going to see this come out. So yeah, so if you're somebody who doesn't want to use their phone for this, you've got a while to go. So go ahead and keep using your phone for now, because it's going to be a while before we have any Android XR glasses to review or talk about. Considering we still, like I said, still don't even have a release date for Muhan, and it's been over a year, right, since we heard about
Yeah.
Muhan? Or if it hasn't been over a year, it's been very close to
They
one.
they announced it at December. They said that we will get
Okay.
a Android XR device sometime in 2025. So we
Yeah.
have about 3 months left, and for them to show
Yeah.
something.
So yeah, and I haven't heard anything. Usually before a big release, as a person who works in the industry of leaks, we all know, like, you start hearing about things a few weeks or even a few months ahead of time. I haven't heard anything, so I don't know what's happening there,
Yeah.
but yeah, maybe we'll find out something soon.
Hopefully along the rumored trifold.
Yes.
So, Scott, before we close off, I did want to ask you one more thing, and it's about these chatbots in general and like the way we access them. So you remember last week we talked about the kind of search experience, like how it's kind of like jarring to have one search bar in one app do one thing, another search bar, another app do one thing, and they're kind of not really integrated well together. I kind of feel like we're seeing the same thing with these LLM chatbots. You have the Gemini app, as we're seeing that like Google's building so much into the Gemini app that they're kind of redesigning it every week to kind of make sure that users are getting the features that they want and they're not missing out on the features and they're able to access all their chats and spending so much time in the apps. But then you also have all these other applications that are kind of building integrations with those chatbots. So, what do you think is going to be the future of our interactions with these chatbots? Do you think are we all going to be using these dedicated apps like Gemini, like ChatGPT, or do you think people are going to be primarily using them through the existing apps that they already use?
I mean, that's a really good question. I know what I would like the most would be one spot. That's what I would like the most. I mean, I know there are a lot of inherent problems that would come along with that, but at the same time, it just take AI overviews, for example. You go to google.com and you type in, a search query of some kind, and depending on whether or not the search query is applicable to AI overviews, you'll get a top box that'll show you created by AI information related to your query. That's Gemini. Like, that's the Gemini LLM doing what it does. You could type the same thing into Gemini itself, the app on your phone, or even the Gemini web browser, the web portal, and you'd get very similar information theoretically. But the fact that these things exist in these two disparate areas is very strange. Obviously, Google is never going to get rid of google.com. It's been decades, and everyone knows that if you want to find information about something, you go to Google. You Google it. So Google can't all of a sudden be like, okay, don't go to Google, guys, go to Gemini. Like, that just wouldn't work for 99% of the population. So yeah, I feel like the easiest solution would be to make google.com a Gemini portal instead, and just integrate everything into one space. But then, are you going to go to google.com to create an image? Like, is that something that the general user is going to understand? Are they going to understand that if they go to google.com and type in, please make me an image of, a badger eating a hot dog, whatever? Like, are they going to know to do that? Or are they going to think, no, that's a Gemini task? So, like, what Google sort of has to contend with here is making sure the general populace, not people like you and me, and not even people that listen to this podcast, but, moms and grandmas and young children and stuff like that, how are they going to convince them to go to these specific places to do these specific things when everything that they're doing is all based on the same underlying chatbot? That's the problem. I wish there was a simple way to just put it all in one spot, because that to me makes the most sense. And that's what's happening with ChatGPT. With ChatGPT, you're going to one spot and you're doing all your ChatGPT stuff. And that's why I think ChatGPT is still, got the mind share throughout the populace of being like, oh, if I want to do these AI things, I go to ChatGPT. And Google's got to fight that somehow. And by having all these disparate things, search bars over here, Gemini, AI overviews over here, it's never going to win. And so Google really needs to figure out a way to elegantly put it all under one roof. How it's going to do that, I don't know. I don't make enough money to think that's how the suggestions on that.
No, I mean, you brought up a good point about, like, they don't want to, they want to integrate it in a way where people are familiar with. They want to rock the boat. They want to get people to use Gemini, but they don't want to rock it too hard, because they don't want to lose people who use google.com, which is a buttload of people. So yeah, that is a question. I have no idea how they're going to answer that. Like, I would also love everything to be in the Gemini app. Like, my go-to is just the Gemini app. Even if I'm using Android Studio for something, they have a Gemini chatbot inside there. Google Docs has like a bunch of Gemini features in there. I don't use any of that. I only go to Gemini.com, Gemini.google.com, or open the Gemini app. I like having everything in one spot. The search history, my custom gems, and all the stuff that I've created, the interface that I'm familiar with. I just like having it in that one spot. I generally expect the output, because I can always switch it to 2.5 Pro, versus there's sometimes no model switcher in these other integrations. But I know most people are not going to be consciously going to the Gemini app. They might be familiar with ChatGPT, and the only way they know how to access that is through the ChatGPT website or the ChatGPT app. But for Gemini, Google has all these existing services that are really popular that they can kind of slowly ease their services into. But I don't think they're going to be able to really get a lot of people, like a critical mass of people, to take their experiences and fully transition and migrate over to the Gemini app. I think, yeah, you're probably right that we're just going to see them ease more and more of their features into their existing apps and services.
It's funny you mentioned, not using the per app Gemini features, because I do this all the time. So what I use Gemini for a lot is for thumbnail ideation for my C. Scott Brown YouTube channel. So I'll come up with an idea and I'll type it in, and then I'll get like a visual representation of the thumbnail I'm looking for, and then I can go and capture a photo and do everything, and we can edit it all together. And I then take that photo that I've created in the Gemini app, download it, and then put it in the Google Doc with the script I'm working on. All of this could be done in Docs, and I never do. I always go to the Gemini web app to do it, and I don't know why. Like, I get to the Docs and I start embedding the video or the thumbnail, and I'm like, I could have just done this all in Docs, and I just forget every time because, like you, I'm like, no, I want one place where everything is.
I think for me the reason is because like we're already so used to how Google Docs works, to how YouTube works and everything, right? Like adding these little tidbits there, like, oh, summarize this document, or you can generate an image in Google Doc. It just adds more and more like mental stimulus, mental things to keep track of. We're like, okay, I'm just gonna ignore all of that. I know that if I want to do anything that's AI related, I'm gonna go to the Gemini app or the Gemini website. I'm just gonna keep using these existing services the way I've been using them for like a decade. And I think personally for me, that's probably the reason why I've been doing everything in just the Gemini app.
Yeah, 100% agree. Feature creep is real. And, if you just look at Microsoft Word, I mean, I don't know if you use the Office suite at all, but I use some Microsoft Office tools. And when you open Microsoft Word now, it's a nightmare. It's like 20 pop-ups and like, use AI this, use AI that. Like, sir, I just want to write some words. Like, I don't want
Sir,
all
this
stuff.
is a Windows PC. Let me use my Windows PC.
Exactly. It's like, it's just too much. And so, yeah, I think Google needs to figure this out, and it needs to figure it out soon. And this is something, like I said, that we talked about in the previous episode, where it's just like, this is now, we were just talking about the problems with Health Connect and how my analogy of like a party, like a post-party cleanup where you have to clean up after this rager. Like, that's what Google is at right now. And the rager is starting to develop. And if Google wants to not have to clean up that mess later, it's got to start now, making sure that things don't get out of hand. And yeah, and unfortunately, I just don't, it's moving too fast. It's moving too fast to try and compete and do all these things. And it's going to have this giant mess for itself 5 years down the road that it's going to then have to try and figure out how to clean up. And it's just like, just come up with an idea right now and go for it. And that's Google's Achilles heel. Like, it just can't do that for some reason.
I think that's actually Google's MO, isn't it? Like, they come up with a new messaging app every week, and then 5 years down the line, they kill it. I think maybe they do a little too much of that.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a tricky situation, and it's just, we're gonna have to see how it all pans out.
Right. So that's everything we've got for you this week. You can find links to all the stories mentioned in this episode in the show notes, and you can find more amazing stories to read over on AndroidAuthority.com.
Thanks for listening to the Authority Insights podcast. We publish every week on YouTube, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. You can follow us everywhere on social media at Android Authority, and you can follow me personally on Instagram, Blue Sky, and my own YouTube channel at C. Scott Brown.
As for me, I'm on most social media platforms posting day in and day out about Android. If you want to keep up with the latest in Android, go to my link tree and find me on the platform that you like best. Thanks for listening.